Welcome back. Today's episode follows Emma Carter, a 28-year-old waitress at a Route 66 diner in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She's hardworking, kind, and just trying to keep her life together, until one small act of decency costs her everything. Picture this: a slow Thursday night, an older man walks in, and Emma is the only one who treats him with respect. The next morning, she's fired. But here's the kicker: he wasn't just any customer. Buckle up for a shocking twist that'll leave you stunned. Hit subscribe, tons of epic stories are on the way. What if the best thing that ever happened to you started with the worst day of your life? Emma Carter never expected to wake up unemployed. She had pulled into the Route 66 diner parking lot that morning just like she had for the past 4 years, gripping a lukewarm coffee in one hand, adjusting her worn-out apron with the other. The sun was barely creeping over the Albuquerque skyline, spilling soft gold over the cracked pavement. Inside, the scent of fresh bacon and stale fryer oil clung to the air, the low hum of an old jukebox mixing with the clatter of silverware and half-hearted morning chatter. It was just another day, or so she thought. Then came the moment. Greg Holloway, the manager, had barely looked up when he said it. "You're done here, Emma." His tone was flat, final. Like she was just another old order ticket tossed in the trash. The words hit like a gut punch. She blinked, her mind scrambling for an explanation. What? Why? Greg sighed, impatient. "You don't fit in with the team anymore." The team was standing behind the counter, watching with thinly veiled satisfaction. Beth, with her arms crossed, a smirk playing at her lips. Sean, pretending to wipe down the counter, barely hiding his amusement. They knew. They had waited for this. Emma swallowed hard, refusing to let them see her break. But as she walked out, one question burned in her mind: was it really a mistake to treat that man with kindness? She'd have her answer soon enough. And so would they. Emma never thought a job could feel like survival. The Route 66 diner wasn't glamorous. It was a roadside stop with sun-faded booths, a flickering neon sign that buzzed against the New Mexico sky, and a coffee pot that never saw the bottom of the sink. The scent of bacon grease and burnt toast clung to her clothes long after she clocked out, a reminder that she spent more time there than anywhere else. The pay? Barely enough. The customers? A mix of truckers, families, and the kind of businessmen who didn't even glance up when handing over their credit cards. But Emma stayed because she had no choice. Her rent swallowed half her paycheck. The other half? It kept her younger sister, Lily, afloat, textbooks, groceries, whatever their mother couldn't cover. Emma never told her. She just made it work. But making it work meant enduring people like Beth and Sean, co-workers who knew the system and played it well. At Route 66, who you served mattered. If a man in a tailored suit walked in, Beth practically tripped over herself to get to him first. If it was someone in paint-stained jeans or an old flannel, Sean ignored them altogether. And Greg? He saw it, encouraged it, rewarded it with better shifts and fake praise. Emma hated it. But after 4 years, she had learned, speak up, and you get pushed out. So she kept her head down, played the game, told herself she could stomach it. Until the night she didn't. Until she made a choice. And the next morning, she paid for it. The moment he walked in, Emma knew exactly how this would go. The bell over the door let out a tired jingle, barely loud enough to pull Beth's eyes from her phone. Sean, leaning against the counter, took one look at the man and turned back to his conversation. No greeting. No, welcome to Route 66. Just the thick, unspoken rule of the diner settling over the room like dust. The man stood just inside the entrance, scanning the space with careful eyes. His button-up shirt was crisp but faded, his slacks neatly pressed but worn at the cuffs. He carried himself with quiet dignity, but Emma recognized the hesitation in his stance, the kind of wariness that came from knowing exactly how people were about to treat you. And just like that, the choice was in front of her. She could do what Beth and Sean expected. Pretend she didn't see him. Let the silence hang until he left, saving them all the trouble. Or. Emma wiped her hands on her apron and walked straight to him. "Evening, sir," she said, her voice steady. "Just you tonight?" The man's eyes met hers, and for a split second, something unreadable flickered there. Then, his shoulders relaxed. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, leading him to a booth by the window. "Got a fresh pot of coffee brewing. Black okay?" He nodded. "That'd be great." As she poured, she felt it, Beth's sharp stare, Sean's amused smirk. A silent message, "You just made a mistake." Maybe she had. But as the man took his first sip, offering her a quiet nod of thanks, Emma knew one thing. It was a mistake she'd make again. Emma knew something was wrong the second she stepped through the door. The usual morning sounds were there, the clink of plates, the hiss of the griddle, the low murmur of customers ordering coffee, but underneath it, something had shifted. Beth wasn't leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone. Sean wasn't joking with the line cooks. Instead, they were both watching her. Beth's smirk curled like smoke, Sean's arms were crossed, and neither of them said a word. Then, from the back, a door creaked open. "Emma." Greg's voice was flat, unreadable. He stood in the office doorway, a stack of papers in one hand, his expression carefully neutral. But Emma felt it, the weight of something already decided. Her stomach twisted. She knew. Still, she squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The office smelled of stale coffee and old receipts, the air thick with something unspoken. Greg exhaled slowly and dropped the words like loose change on a counter. "We're letting you go." The sentence hit like a slap. Emma blinked, her brain scrambling to catch up. "What? Why?" Greg barely looked up. "It's just not working out." Not working out. After 4 years. Never missing a shift. Never being late. Never. "This is about last night," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. Greg didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. His silence was the answer. Beth and Sean had won. Emma's fingers clenched around her apron. Her heart pounded, but she refused to let the sting of betrayal show. Instead, she untied the apron, set it down, and met Greg's eyes. "You know this isn't right." Then, without another word, she walked out. But this wasn't the end. Emma's phone buzzed, breaking the silence of her car, but she almost didn't answer. She had been sitting there for an hour, hands gripping the steering wheel, replaying the moment over and over. The smirk on Beth's face. The finality in Greg's voice. The way Sean hadn't even bothered to hide his amusement. Fired. Just like that. For years gone in a heartbeat. Her mind raced with questions she didn't have answers for. How would she pay rent? What about Lily's tuition? Was all of this really worth it? Then, the phone vibrated again. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Probably another rejection from the dozen places she had already applied to in the last few hours. With a sigh, she swiped to decline, then hesitated. Something in her gut told her to answer. "Hello." A deep, steady voice filled the line. "Emma Carter." She frowned. "Yes. Who's this?" A brief pause, then, "You served me last night at Route 66 Diner." Her breath caught. The older man. "Oh," she said quickly. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" Another pause. Then, his next words made her sit up straight. "I heard what happened this morning." Emma's grip on the phone tightened. "News travels fast, I guess." "That's not why I'm calling," he said. There was a shift in his tone, something firm, deliberate. Emma knew whatever came next was going to change everything. "Emma," he said, "I own that diner. And I need to talk to you about something important." Emma pressed the phone tighter to her ear, convinced she had misheard. "You own the diner?" "That's right," the man, James Bennett, said, his voice calm, steady. "Not just that one. I own the entire Route 66 chain." The words hit like a thunderclap. Emma sat frozen in her car, the world outside suddenly too still, too quiet. The sun had dipped lower, washing the parking lot in deep orange, but she barely noticed. The man she had served last night, the one Beth and Sean had ignored, the one Greg had likely wanted her to dismiss, was her boss. Her real boss. I don't understand," she finally managed. James sighed on the other end. "I don't make formal inspections. I don't announce myself. I walk in as just another customer. That's how I find out the truth." A pause. "And last night, I found out exactly what I needed to know." Emma's pulse pounded. "And what did you find out?" A long silence. "Then, that my restaurant has a serious problem. And that you were the only one who did the right thing." Emma exhaled sharply, her grip tightening around the phone. Everything suddenly made sense. Greg's cold dismissal. Beth's knowing smirk. They thought they had won. But they had no idea what was coming next. James cleared his throat. "I let them fire you on purpose, Emma." Her stomach dropped. "You, what?" "I needed to see how far it would go." His voice turned firm. "And now, I have my answer." Emma's breath caught. She wasn't sure where this was going, but something told her, she wasn't unemployed for long. Emma had walked into Route 66 diner 1,000 times before, but today, every step felt different. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh rain on asphalt. As she gripped the strap of her bag tighter, the neon "Open" sign flickered against the diner's fogged-up window. Inside, everything looked the same, booths lined with worn red leather, the coffee pot steaming on the counter, the jukebox humming an old tune. But the people? That's where everything had changed. Beth, perched behind the counter, caught sight of her first. Her smirk faltered. Sean, leaning against the drink station, straightened up like he had been caught doing something wrong. A few of the younger servers whispered, exchanging quick glances. The air shifted, like a storm was about to hit, but no one knew when. Then, from the back, the door swung open. Greg. His eyes landed on her, confusion flickering across his face before settling into irritation. He took a step forward, jaw tightening. "Emma," he said, slow and deliberate. "You don't work here anymore." Emma tilted her head, letting the silence stretch. Then. Actually, a deep voice cut in behind her. "She does." Every head in the diner turned. James Bennett walked in, hands tucked in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Beth's face paled. Sean's grip tightened around a coffee mug. Greg blinked. "You're done, Greg," James said simply. "Emma is the new manager." Silence crashed over the room. Emma took a slow breath, then set her bag down on the counter with purpose. Now, it was her turn to run this place. The fallout was immediate, and brutal. Greg was the first to go. His protests barely made it past James's unwavering stare before he grabbed his things and stormed out, slamming the office door behind him. The sound echoed through the diner like a final, desperate attempt to hold on to power that had already slipped through his fingers. Beth and Sean weren't far behind. Beth stayed silent, jaw clenched, eyes burning with the realization that her protected status had just evaporated. Sean muttered something under his breath, shaking his head, but he didn't argue, he knew there was no point. They weren't untouchable anymore. And the rest of the staff? Some stayed. Some left. A few of the younger waitresses, the ones who had followed Beth's lead, quit on the spot, throwing their aprons down like it was some kind of rebellion. Others hesitated, uncertain, stealing nervous glances at Emma as if waiting for some kind of sign. But Emma didn't waver. She set the tone fast: no more favoritism, no more ignoring customers, no more backroom whispers about who was worth good service. Every customer mattered. Every order counted. And those who couldn't adjust, they didn't last. At first, the tension was thick, the air charged with quiet defiance. But then, something began to shift. Regulars who had long been dismissed started coming back, their cautious glances turning into grateful smiles. The kitchen staff, once resigned to the diner's toxic culture, began speaking up, offering ideas, taking pride in the work. And Emma? She stood behind the counter, watching it all unfold, feeling something she hadn't in years. This place finally felt right. But the biggest test was still ahead. Emma barely looked up when she heard the door chime, but when she saw who it was, she straightened immediately. James Bennett. He walked in the same way he had the first time, quiet, observant, hands in the pockets of his coat. But this time, the weight of the room had shifted. No one ignored him. No one hesitated. A waitress near the coffee pot, one of the newer hires, offered a polite, "Good evening, sir." James nodded but kept walking, heading straight for the counter where Emma stood, balancing an invoice clipboard between her hands. "How's my investment doing?" His voice was steady, but there was a trace of something lighter: approval. Emma exhaled, setting the clipboard down. She glanced around. The diner was steady with movement, but different, lighter, more welcoming. Customers who used to sit stiffly in booths now chatted casually. The younger servers, once afraid to break Beth's unwritten rules, carried themselves with more confidence. Even the kitchen, normally closed off from view, felt alive, the clatter of plates and the rhythmic scrape of the spatula against the griddle familiar, but not heavy. "We're in good shape," Emma said finally, meeting his gaze. James surveyed the room again, then gave a small nod. "Told you you'd be fine." Emma smirked, crossing her arms. "You didn't exactly give me a choice." James chuckled. "No, I didn't." Emma leaned against the counter, glancing out the window at the neon sign buzzing against the night sky. "It's weird," she admitted. "For the longest time, this was just a job. A paycheck. Now, it feels like something more." James studied her for a moment before speaking. "Funny how life works, huh?" Emma nodded. But deep down, she knew, this wasn't luck. This was what doing the right thing looked like. Emma felt the shift before she even saw her. The low murmur of the diner had settled into its usual rhythm, silverware clinking against plates, the hum of conversations blending into the faint crackle of the jukebox. But then, a different kind of silence stretched over one corner of the room. A watchful silence. Emma turned, and there she was. Beth. She sat alone in a back booth, fingers drumming lazily against the tabletop, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of her. Her uniform was gone, replaced by a snug leather jacket and dark red lipstick that almost hid the bitterness curling at the edges of her smirk. Emma squared her shoulders, forcing herself to stay calm as she approached. "Didn't think I'd see you in here again," Emma said, keeping her tone even. Beth let out a soft laugh, stirring her coffee with deliberate slowness. "What can I say? I was curious." She leaned back, studying Emma like she was seeing her for the first time. "Power looks good on you." Emma didn't flinch. "It's not about power." Beth's smirk widened just slightly. "That's what they all say, at first." A quiet tension settled between them. The air felt heavier, thick with something unspoken. Emma could have walked away, could have dismissed it as nothing more than Beth's usual games. But something about her tone, about the way she watched, made Emma pause. Beth reached for her coffee, taking a slow sip before setting it down with a quiet clink. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she murmured. "Because trust me, people don't forget." Emma met her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Neither do I. Power doesn't change people, it reveals them." Emma had walked into Route 66 diner as a waitress for 4 years, keeping her head down, doing her job, and pretending the world was fair. She had seen how people bent the rules, how they decided who mattered and who didn't. She had watched as those who spoke up got pushed out, and those who played along got rewarded. But in a single night, one small act of kindness changed everything. She lost her job for doing what was right. And for a moment, it felt like the world had proven her worst fears, that decency didn't matter, that fairness was just a myth people told themselves. But then, fate, or maybe something greater, stepped in. And it gave her a chance to rewrite the rules. The truth is, most people never get that chance. They stay stuck in places where the wrong voices hold the power, where kindness is treated like weakness, where looking the other way is easier than standing up. But the hardest thing about power isn't gaining it. It's what you do with it once it's yours. Beth's warning lingered for a reason, because people don't forget. The ones who built the old system will wait for cracks, for moments of doubt, for any sign that Emma might slip into the same game they once played. But Emma wasn't here to play. She had been tested in the worst way possible, and she had made her choice. So the real lesson? Do the right thing anyway. Even when no one is watching. Even when it costs you. Because you never know who's paying attention. And sometimes, losing everything is how you find out what truly matters. If you love this wild ride at Route 66 Diner, where Emma's act of kindness turned a brutal firing into a life-changing twist, then buckle up, because there's so much more to come. Hit that subscribe button for Daily Stories, your front row seat to gripping tales that twist, turn, and leave you thinking long after the credits roll. We're bringing you cinematic, suspenseful stories packed with drama, unexpected justice, and powerful life lessons. Don't miss out, join our crew, turn on notifications, and dive into the next epic adventure. Follow us on X for daily updates and behind-the-scenes content. Great stories are waiting, let's explore them together.